If you haven't heard, the comedian Rob O'Reilly has been fired by Carnival Cruise Line from all future performances after allegedly using the N-word multiple times during a performance. Rob O'Reilly, who was white, was also captured on a TikTok video of the same performance, telling people in the audience who were offended by his language to get the blank out. TMZ reported that a woman whose name we now know is Pamela Freelo was at the comedy show on Carnival Cruise Line and recorded a short snippet of Rob O'Reilly's set during the cruise. She didn't capture his actual use of the racial slur, but she did capture him saying, quote, "If you're offended, get the blank out," end quote. This video was eventually shared to TikTok with an on-screen caption that reads, "So, on Carnival Cruise right now, and they are perfectly fine hiring someone who uses the N-word multiple times in his show. And when the issue was raised, he said, and I quote, 'If you're offended, get the blank out,' end quote." That statement was met with cheers from the audience. Pamela Freelo went on to post another video and explained further that typically patrons are instructed not to record performances, but when she heard Rob O'Reilly freely using the N-word, she started to record the offensive comedy routine. Consequently, Twitter users also uncovered other racist tweets by Rob O'Reilly, and one Twitter user named Chris Evans posted this. "For me, people are like ski slopes. I'm scared of the black ones. Today, every store acts like a crackhead broke in. Come at 4 a.m. and buy a TV half off. Guess that's why they call it Black Friday. Did you know 1 in 15 black men has HIV? That's a pretty insane statistic. Every NBA team probably has one dude with AIDS. When I look at my fellow man, I don't think that guy's black or that guy's Puerto Rican. I think that guy's a felon." Although this video is about Rob O'Reilly and his use of the N-word, I want to provide more commentary on this subject, which unfortunately is not an isolated incident. I believe it is necessary to discuss sensitive topics frequently in order to grow and learn how to consider others' views on issues that plague many communities in America and worldwide. The title of this video, That Word, is obviously referring to the N-word, and I feel it is necessary to give my commentary on this oftentimes controversial topic to hopefully explain how simple it really is to put an end to the confusion some people have surrounding the use of the N-word. For those who may not know, by the early 1800s, it was formally established that the N-word was a derogatory racial slur specifically for Africans and African Americans. And in the 21st century, it remains a principal term of white racism. The N-word is a term of exclusion, and no other American surname carries as much purposeful cruelty as that word. Other racial and ethnic groups have also been victimized by demoralizing slurs, but in this show I'm focusing on the N-word because other racial slurs have been accepted as just that, racial slurs. But because there is a segment of the African American community that uses the N-word in their own community and in certain genres of music, it seems as if the lines have become blurred for this racial slur in particular. The first point I would like to explore is the argument from people who are not black is that because some black people use the N-word amongst themselves, that black people should not have a problem with people who are not black using it either. Well, I'm always perplexed by this argument because I have never had a desire to use a racial slur against anybody. If anything, I make a conscious effort to never offend anyone by using language that is directed at their race or ethnic group. It's just not something I desire to be a part of, and I don't understand why people who feel this way feel left out when they hear a black person say the N-word and are bothered by the fact that it's not politically correct for them to say it. I mean, who chomps at the bit because they feel unable to participate without consequences in an N-word fest? And yes, some black people use the N-word amongst themselves because it was a reaction to take the power out of that demeaning word and turn it into something else. And we've all heard it used as a term of endearment, but only in our community, of course. Black people found a way to take the sting out of the mouths of their oppressor to make it more palpable to exist in a world that devalued their existence. And although there may also be other reasons why some Black people still use it in their communities and in their circles, the reason why some still use it has nothing to do with why non-Black people should not use it. The original definition of the N-word remains the same. But just because the African American community tried to find a way to deal with this racial slur by using it amongst themselves is a response to an atrocity, not a reason for other non-Black people to use that as a basis for an argument that would allow them to use it as well. For non-Black people, the definition of the N-word remains the same, as I stated before. The definition has only changed for some Black people who have converted it from a negative to more of a positive for us and only us. And once again, for those non-Black people who feel they should be able to use the N-word because Black people use it, consider that our use of it is something that the Black community needs to address, and not anyone else. It's our issue, and our community is divided as well as to whether the N-word should be used amongst ourselves because of how hurtful that word is to our community. It is problematic to some, but it's still our struggle to come to terms with that doesn't include anyone else but our community. I would also say that it is important to understand, whether you agree or not, that the N-word does not mean the same thing to us when it is used amongst ourselves in our community. Why would Black people use such an offensive word towards one another that has the same meaning as when a non-Black person uses it? Because it doesn't. Always keep in mind that it doesn't have the same meaning, and if you are not Black, that might be hard for you to understand, but it doesn't matter if you're unable to connect with that concept. It still doesn't mean the same thing when we use it amongst ourselves. The N-word is not the only racial slur that Black people have been victimized by either. No American group has endured as many racial nicknames as Black people. We've been called coon, Tom, savage, pickaninny, mammy, buck, Sambo, jigaboo, buckwheat, and the list goes on. And many of these slurs became fully traditional, pseudo-scientific, literary, cinematic, and everyday distortions of African Americans. These caricatures, whether spoken, written, or reproduced in media and material objects, reflect the extent and the vast network of anti-Black prejudice. And this brings me to my last point. As stated before, Black people are not spewing anti-Black prejudice when they use the N-word in their communities. I myself do not use the N-word, and I would rather that Black people would abandon using this word all across the board as well. But I do understand why some don't agree with me, and I'm okay with that. If people would treat the N-word strictly by its definition, and I quote, "In the early 1800s, it was formally established that the N-word was a derogatory racial slur specifically for Africans and African Americans, and in the 21st century, it remains a principal term of white racism. The N-word is a term of exclusion, and no other American surname carries as much purposeful cruelty as that word," end quote. If it was treated as the definition says, then there would not be so much controversy about Black people and non-Black people using it. We don't need any more forums, debates, conferences, or social media experiments. The N-word is a racial slur, and there is nothing that will change that definition. Rob O'Reilly has not made a public statement at the time of this video, October 3rd, 2022. Bloopers. I want to provide more commentary on this subject. Though this video was about Rob Reiner and his use of Rob Reiner.